Welcome back to the Band Guide, where we use GarageBand to create professional sounding music. I'm your band guy, Colin, and today I want to talk to you about 3 production elements that you can use when you're at the end of the recording process to just sweeten your song a little bit. These production elements are really simple to implement and can just level it up a little bit. It's like adding a really good seasoning on a dish that's already delicious, but just helps kick it up a notch. Or I like to think of it as the sauce, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But before we get into it, I just want to remind you, this is the last video in the recording portion of the Ultimate GarageBand Beginner's Guide series. This series, we're walking through everything from the first time you open up GarageBand until you export out your finished, mixed, and mastered song. And we've actually been recording the song together throughout that process. This is the end of that recording, and then we're going to get into actually mixing and mastering it coming up next. So definitely come back for those. And if you haven't seen all the other videos, go back and check those out as well. And in addition to this entire series, I've also put together the Ultimate GarageBand Guide. This guide walks through everything from recording, mixing, mastering, shortcuts, gear recommendations, all that stuff. And it's completely free from link in the description below. So be sure to pick it up. It's just something downloadable that you can quickly reference anytime. So be sure to grab it. It's completely free. But let's go and get into today's video looking at 3 production elements. Now, quick story. This is how I think of this. If you're on my email list, you know that the other day was my birthday. My wife and I went out to dinner and went to my favorite restaurant here in town. It's called Culture Cafe. It's awesome. We actually had our wedding reception there. It's just the best people, best food, super cool. Okay, anyway, so I get an Impossible Burger. Do I scream vegetarian? I think I do. Anyway, got an Impossible Burger. It was so good. And about halfway into it, and my wife says, "Aren't you going to put the sauce on that?" And I didn't even realize that the sauce was on the side. It was so good. I was enjoying myself. And I add it to it, I take a bite, and I'm like, oh my God, that just leveled it up so much. And it's amazing. It was already good. I was already enjoying it, but this additional element just took it up a whole nother layer. That's how I like to think about this stuff, right? These production elements. Your song should already sound good. It should already be coming together. But these last little pieces can just take it up a little bit. So the 3 elements that we're going to talk about in today's video are transitions, textures, and grit. And then I'm going to throw a bonus one to you at the end that you can play around on your own time. But there's 3 that we're going to use in today's video. Starting with transitions. Now, transitions, we're just talking about between different sections in your song. So, for example, going from your verse into your pre-chorus, or your verse into your chorus, pre-chorus into your chorus, chorus into your bridge. Between those different sections, having some sort of transitional elements that help either take it up and ramp it up or kind of drop it back down, depending on what you're going for. So, for example, here, coming out of this pre-chorus, we have a full stop. Now, this is really how we wrote it to build in this transition. But then there's a couple other things that we can do to make it even more extreme that we're going to look at here. The first is having some sort of swell into the next section. And I've done that on the bass guitar here, but I'm going to give you something in just a second that you could use in place of this if you don't have it already. So let's listen to this section right here as it transitions from this pre-chorus into this chorus. Every day the universe is there. So we let it get really small before we make it really big, right? And one of my favorite tools that I'm using here is this bass bomb. So this is completely free. I'll link to it below where you can grab it. This bass bomb here, you can just drag and drop it into your session. And I've already done that here. It's just a sub hit. So if we listen to it, it's just a sub hit. But what it does is add this extra like huge low in there for just 1 second, right as the start of this chorus. Every day. If I take that out, nothing wrong with that, but this being in there just gives you a little bit more impact when it comes in. Now I mentioned there we use a little bass slide. I'm just sliding down on the bass right there to go into it, to kind of introduce that you're coming back into it. Another way you can do that is also with something from that kit. It's a swell and bass bomb little sample pack, I guess. I've never thought of that as that, but it is. And this swell could also work in a situation like this. So let's say in place of this bass, we'll just delete this for the time being, you could have a little swell that comes in. Right? Doesn't quite fit for this song, but I've used that in many songs. Definitely something that could be right in your song. And I actually want to play around with using that at the end. This is kind of a cool thing to do. The end of the song builds up. So I wonder if that swell would actually be cool coming into that very last section there. If it swelled up into that, just subtly, right? Kind of tucked in the background. I'm going to chop off the end of it so it's a hard transition. Let's just mix it and blend it up in here. Maybe. I don't know. I'll leave it for now. I don't know if that will make the final cut, but it's in there for now. Okay, that's actually a good note, is that you don't want to do too much. So always be thinking, do I like this, or is it just getting in the way, adding too much? If it's in the way, just take it out, right? So I'll keep it in for now, but I'm going to keep reassessing that as I go. So the other place that I'm going to use this bass bomb is halfway through the chorus. So this chorus has, 2 sections, 8 bars. And we're going to put it in the second half here. And then I'm also going to do it going into this outro here to make sure that the outro hits hard. Right now, without it, this outro sounds like this. Fine. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but add in the sub hit. Again, you shouldn't necessarily notice it. You should feel it a little bit more, right? Okay. So that's a couple of simple ways that you can build up your transition. So the swell and this bass bomb, kind of adding tension as you build into it, and then using a bass bomb to relieve that tension and add impact. That's really satisfying. And then as you're arranging your song, also think about, is there anything that I could cut out right before I get to the chorus to make it a little bit smaller? So in this case, we're doing an extreme example of that where everything's cutting out right before it goes into that chorus. But in your song, maybe you just cut out the bass guitar for that last bar right before the chorus, or even that last note right before that chorus. So pay attention to that. Play around with your transitions. The second production element we're talking about today is textures. Now, one of my favorite way to add textures and rhythm in a song is with percussion. So we're just going to use the built-in GarageBand loops because they're really powerful. I want to add a tambourine into this song. So we just created a new audio track here. I'm going to call it Tambo. They also have drummer tracks and MIDI tracks, software instrument tracks that you can use. But in this case, I want to look up here just a tambourine. Let's listen to a few here. That one's kind of cool. I don't know if that's right for our song, but let's try it. And the cool thing is that these will automatically be in time with your song when you drop them in. I don't think that's right. I think I want something a little bit more simple. Let's try this one. Oh yeah, that's it. So that'll line up with the drum part really well. Let's listen to that here. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, okay. So we're just gonna loop that, and then I know at the end, there's a couple fills in here. Let's listen to the 2 fills and make sure that this still works with those fills. Where this accent is accenting on each snare drum hit, if we just listen to it with the drums here. So what I want to pay attention to is, like, when there's a fill on the drums, is this tambourine lining up with that? So that one's fine. And then at the end here, okay, I want it to go da-da. So let's see if we can make it do it. That's a cool thing with these loops, is that you don't have to take them just exactly how they are. You can chop them up a little bit and customize them to be exactly what you want them to be. So what we're looking for here is to basically have it do a second accent. Gat, right? So I need to copy one of these accents. So I'm just going to go here to where it happens, hit Command T to split it, and then Command T, and now I can copy just this one hit, and I can go to where that snare happens and paste it. Let's listen to that. Let's do that one more time over here. Sounds like this. I like that better. I think that just fits a little bit better. So let's go ahead and bring this down in volume, and let's listen to what this adds to this chorus here. It's amazing. It's a simple element, but it can add so much.
Every day the universe is fixed, but I'm still standing here.
But take it away.
Just enough this. Every day we keep racing through space, but I'm so stuck in place. So stuck in place.
Cool, right? I mean, it's a subtle thing, but it definitely makes a difference right there. So I love just throwing some percussion in. The loops in GarageBand are great for that because they have so many. We could also go in and we could find a shaker. There's a bunch of shaker sounds here. Some of these are more like loops, right? But there's so many different elements that you can bring in. Cabasas. Let's look up cabasas because these are a cool element. Just like weird percussion sounds, right? So all these little textures that you can mix into your song to just give you that little extra energy. You saw how you don't necessarily notice this tambourine when it's in. When it goes away, it's like so noticeable. So those textural elements, percussion are a great starting point. You can also do this with things like if you don't already have an acoustic guitar in your song, listen to what this acoustic is adding, right? These acoustics are just doing this. If I take them away,
every day we keep racing through space, but I'm so stuck in place, so stuck in place.
so whether it's a tambourine, a shaker, a cabasa, an acoustic guitar, something that can give it that little extra textural element can be really, really impactful and level it up. Again, just a little bit of sauce on top. You don't necessarily think about it when it's in there, but when it's gone, you're like, whoa, that totally changed. Okay, the third and final element that I want to talk about is grit. So grit is just adding something interesting. And you could add this to all sorts of things in little subtle ways, or in the case of what I'm looking for in this song is I want to add a parallel grit track to the drums, which is a distortion track on the drums that I'm blending up next to the drums that just adds a little bit more texture to the drum sound. So you can do this on drums, but think about other ways that you might be able to do it as well to add this little bit of interest. So I'm going to literally just option click and drag this down. It's going to duplicate that track for me. And then we're going to go in here and I'm just going to change out this compressor for, let's just start with the distortion here. Let's start with distortion 2. Let's solo this drum. I'm going to go and title this Grit so I can stay organized here. And let's listen to this. I'm going to turn the cymbals down. I don't want too much cymbal sound on this. I want it mainly on the snares and kick drum and toms. All right, so it's interesting already. Let's really drive it harder with this pre-gain here and really just make this kind of a crazy distorted sound. Oh yeah, turn the volume down here a little bit. That's pretty cool. Let's try a couple different sounds here. That's crazy. So I like this nasty. Okay, I like it. I don't know that I love this exact tone. Let's try a different type of distortion here really quick. Let's actually do something crazy. Let's go through the pedal board and try distortion pedal. So I'm going to turn off this distortion 2. And let's just bring in, let's try rock. Let's see what this sounds like. Whoa. Okay, this is pretty cool. Okay, cymbals as low as I can get them. Okay, I think that's really cool. Let's listen to this, like blend this up into the drum sound. So this is our regular drums, and I'm gonna mix this up in. Cool, okay. So let's listen to this with the full song here. Let's actually go to a quieter section. Let's try in this verse.
Can't lose this one all day long. I get no work done all day long. I get what have I done?
It's a subtle thing, but it just adds a little bit of energy to that drum track, right? So playing around with grit in your mix and seeing if you can add distortion on different elements can really just add some cool things, some cool textures to your tones. Especially if you have really, really clean tones throughout, it can just give it a little bit more of an organic and natural feel. Okay, so those are our three main ones. We're talking about transitions, we're talking about textures, and we're talking about grit. The final one that I just want to challenge you with to play around with is, are there any little places where you could add flourishes? So we don't really have anything like that in this song. I think this song is a little too straightforward to call for it. But it could just be like a little guitar lick that just happens when you have a gap between vocals. Or it could just be like a little moment of a little synth doing like just a couple of notes that are just kind of adding a little bit of a vibe or a sound. So things like that, those little flourishes, those little touches can really, again, just add something cool to the songs, right? So that's all we're doing here. As we're finishing up our recording and about to get into mixing, we're thinking about what little elements can I just add to tighten this up a little bit. Not tighten it up, but just kind of make it more interesting or more compelling for the listener and engaging, right? So think of it as that sauce on that burger. I was already loving that burger, add a little sauce to it, and I'm like, man, how was I eating this before this sauce, right? You want those elements where you don't necessarily realize when they're not there, but when they are there and you take them away, it's like, oh man, this feels wrong now, right? Okay, so if you don't already have it, be sure to grab the Ultimate GarageBand Guide for free from the link in the description below. It's really gonna help you out. Before you go, as always, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these elements have you been using in your song so far? And if you're not using all of them, which one are you gonna try in your next mix? Let me know in the comments below. If this video was helpful, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow. We're starting to move towards mixing this song.
One